is your takeaway? What jumped out at
I
you?
I I have realized how programmed I am with my expectations. That I expect things to go a certain way, and when they don't, I immediately go to it's my fault, I did something wrong. And I'm realizing more and more that if I stop myself before I get there, take that pause and go into a place of gratitude, very soon thereafter I get an awareness of what I was shortchanging myself on. And more and more I'm seeing, like, if I don't get in the way of this, I have a chance for this program to work for me and for me to have the quality of life that is the greatest blessing of doing these steps, and not getting all bent out of shape, and trying to change things that don't matter as much as knowing that love is always present.
Mm, nice.
Grateful.
And I love, I don't know if you were listening to yourself, but when you said pause, you stretched it out as though you were creating a nice big pause in your consciousness to use. Because that's what we do, right? That pause becomes such an important part of self-soothing. And that's a very important element, which we'll be getting into more down the road, not tonight, but self-soothing is such an essential element or essential skill if we're going to have any emotional sobriety. Because when we self-soothe, we're actually going into pause, right? And we're going to talk about that tonight, the difference between reacting and responding. Huge difference to be responsible versus reactionary. Big difference. Yeah. Well, thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are continuing our exploration of how to hold on to ourselves in relationships. Um, and this is the final insight I discussed in my book, 12 Essential Insights. And this last year and a half, we've been going through and really, taking a deep dive into each of these insights and what they mean. And it's been very, I think, very revealing because, this gives me an opportunity to talk about some stuff that wasn't in the book, as well as to explain some things and share some things and clarify a few things that are in my book. Well, I defined holding on to ourselves because that's what this last chapter is about. And it was chapter 12 because all of the work that we've done to get to this point really is going to manifest itself by how we make contact in our relationships with people. In fact, this is what Ernie Larson described as stage two recovery. He says stage one recovery was breaking the bonds of our addiction. But in stage two recovery, what we do is we really now start to learn about how to have a healthy relationship. It's all about learning how to be in relationship in a different way. And that's why I think emotional sobriety and stage two recovery go hand in hand because emotional sobriety is all about showing up and bringing the best of us and having the best possible attitude towards our relationships. So just like with the working the 12 steps, Bill said, if we work the 12 steps and practice these principles in our daily lives, that we and those among us or about us find emotional sobriety. The same is true here. If we really plug in some of these insights in terms of what creates emotional sobriety, that we're going to find ourselves showing up different in our relationships. We're going to be having a different perspective of things. I mean, just a quick one comes to mind, like the whole idea of trouble, right? When before my old idea was when there was trouble, there was something wrong. And now when I put on this pair of glasses that have lenses that are cut from emotional sobriety, I don't see trouble as indicating a problem anymore. I see trouble as more of a spotlight that's highlighting the next step in my development. That's the other big shift that I've had in my consciousness is that before I used to think about what was wrong with me. Well, I'm not thinking about what's wrong with me anymore. I'm thinking about where my development is delayed. What is the next step for me to grow myself and become more differentiated and to understand that my problems and my suffering comes from my immaturity, not from some psychopathology I have, but it comes from really being stuck at a very, very early age in life. We talk oftentimes about that, our development got arrested at the age that we started drinking and using. Well, that was 12 years old for me. But I think that our development gets stuck whether or not we start drinking and using early because the ideas we have are about how to be in this world are riddled with an undifferentiated consciousness. Now, some of you may be unfamiliar with the term differentiation. Think of it as maturity. The more differentiated I am, the more I can act for myself without being selfish. I'll say it again. The more differentiated or mature I become, I can act for myself without being selfish. I can do things for you and act for you without losing myself. So emotional sobriety allows me to keep this wonderful balance between I and you, between the we and the I, between togetherness and separateness. And when I balance those two forces, I show a high degree of maturity. Very, easier said than done. I'm not saying that we all can get that in a heartbeat. It takes a lot of work. It takes a willingness to take the hits. And that's what I mean. When I said that trouble doesn't mean something's wrong, a willingness to take the hits is to be able to take a look at what's really going on for us when we're upset and to start to have this curiosity about what's off with me that I'm reacting to this situation in the way I am right now. Not what's wrong with me, but what's off with me. And then we can get busy trying to get, more balanced and have be able to show up in a better way in our relationship. So I talk about that this stage of recovery, right? This emotional sobriety, it's all about how we make contact in a relationship. And when there's trouble, and this is so important that we learn how to hold on to ourselves and not get lost in either our anxiety or in the situation that's going on. Now, obviously, that means that you have to have some sense of who you are and what you want. You see, a big part of the work in emotional sobriety is us getting clear about who we are and what we want. Now, when I talk about who we are, I think about that and I like to think about the idea of sprinkling a lot of humility on that, meaning this. When I start to think who I am, I realize that I'm not any one part of me, that I am a synthesis and integration of a lot of different parts of me. And I know before in my life, the more those parts were in conflict, the, the more anxiety and the more I struggled with life. The more those parts found, or I was able to find an appropriate balance and coordination of those parts, the better I was able to function in my life, in my relationship with myself, in my relationship with you, and my relationship with life itself. So emotional sobriety is developing an appropriate balance and coordination of all of what we are. We saw this when we were talking about step 6 and 7, which is why we're entirely ready to have God remove these character defects and then humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Step 6 and 7, we can understand, and Bill even stated it this way, as aiming at developing the best possible attitude towards our relationship with ourself, with life, and with other people. So holding on to yourself is critical to bringing the best of you to a relationship. Because when you don't hold on to yourself and you let your anxiety determine how you're going to react, you are never going to function from the best in you. You are going to go down to a very low common denominator with you and whoever you're interacting with. We can think about operating from your lower self, not your higher self. When I am reactive and I am reacting to my anxiety, which means I'm feeling threatened in some way, that things aren't going to go the way that I want them to. And if they don't, I'm not going to know how to cope. So I want them to be what I want them to be. When I'm operating out of that anxiety, then my reaction to a situation, excuse me, when I'm operating out of that anxiety, my reaction to the situation is going to be either an over response or an under reaction. I'm going to make too big of a deal out of something that's not a big deal, or I'm going to underreact. That's something that deserves a bigger reaction. So let's say my anxiety is about that you don't like me and you say something that's offensive to me and we're in a social situation. I just sit there and swallow it rather than say something to take care of myself with you. That's an underreaction. Or to go out the other side of it, I blow up, I cause a big scene, and I overreact to it. With emotional sobriety, I'm able to stay right in the middle of that. I'm able to have a response that is appropriate to the situation I'm in, and that creates a healthy relationship to reality. And that I'm aware of what's going on. I don't lose myself in this situation. I take the situation into account. Another way of thinking about it is I let the best of me talk to the best in you. Now that takes us to tonight's subject. As we're learning more and more about how relationships and how to show up and what are the dynamics involved, tonight we're going to focus on two dimensions of whether or not your behavior enhances your encounter with yourself, with life, or with another person, or does your behavior diminish that encounter with yourself, with life, or with someone else? So let's define encounter enhancing and encounter diminishing before we go on. When my behavior enhances an encounter, it adds to the situation. I bring a certain perspective that becomes useful. I don't create more conflict. I'm able to engage in the conflict and find a way to struggle where everybody can win. Encounter enhancing behavior is grounded in you in empathy and respect. I cannot enhance my encounter with you if I'm not aware of who you are and what's going on with you. I cannot enhance my encounter with myself or with my life unless I'm aware of what's going on with me and how I'm feeling. Empathy becomes critical if we're going to show up in a way where we add to or contribute to the well-being, success of our relationships. And I'm going to go into examples of this in a bit, but I just want to define them generally. Encounter diminishing behavior subtracts instead of adds. It takes away from who I am. Encounter enhancing adds to who I am. Encounter diminishing subtracts. There's no respect for myself or others. There's an attempt to try to control my life or control what's going on or control you because I don't have confidence that I can deal with things as they are. So in this next week, I want you to pay very close attention to your behavior and to become aware, am I enhancing my experience right now or am I subtracting from it? Good example. Let's say I'm sitting down with Tom and I'm wanting to share something that I'm going through with Tom Rutledge. And I start to talk to him, but I talk in generalities. I say, sometimes in situations, people start to feel this way or people start to feel that way. Now, that behavior, when I speak in the third person, I am diminishing the encounter with myself, diminishing the experience I'm having with the experience I'm having, and I'm also diminishing my encounter with Tom. If I was just to change my language from the third person to the first person and say, I'm really struggling, instead of, people struggle with situations like this all the time, or it's common for people to feel this. If I made it personal and says, Tom, I'm really struggling, I've now enhanced my encounter with myself. I've also created a very different experience with Tom because now he's relating to me very personally. If I speak in generalities, earlier today I got upset versus talking about specifically what upset me earlier, what I said, what I did, how I dealt with it. Speaking in generalities doesn't help me move anywhere and deal with the situation. Getting down to specifics would. If I start speaking generalities with Tom, I'm not enhancing my encounter with him or with myself, I'm diminishing it. The more specific I can be with what I'm experiencing, the more I can become aware of what I'm doing and what I'm not, and use that information to help me move in the direction I want to move. Or to tell you the truth, what will happen is when I become aware of that, I will start moving in the direction I need to move in almost automatically, or automatically, not almost. When I use words like qualifying things like almost, possibly so, that's diminishing my encounter. Yeah, I might feel that way, or that might be possible, instead of saying, I might be angry versus I'm angry. When I qualify things, I am distancing myself from my experience. When I don't listen to myself when I'm talking, I'm diminishing my encounter with myself and with you. I'm not noticing if something I say brings up a certain feeling inside of me. Maybe a change in my throat, or my eyes become watery, or all of a sudden I start to hear a tone in my voice or a quality to it that wasn't there before. See, when I bring my full attention to myself, And to you in the moment, I'm enhancing that encounter. When I am not paying attention and almost like reading from a script or performing, I am diminishing that encounter. If I'm so focused on whether or not you like me or not, whether or not you're going to validate me, and if I'm anxious about that, I'm going to diminish my encounter with you because I'm going to start acting in the way that I think I need to act in order for me to get your approval. And counter-enhancing behavior operates from a clear sense of who I am, a clear sense of what I'm experiencing, and the ability to find the words that most accurately express what I'm experiencing in the moment. When I'm able to do that, when I'm able to take a moment and really collect myself and collect my experience and get in touch with what's going on and able to find the words that communicate that to you, I will contribute a lot to having a much more personal and powerful experience and encounter with you and with myself. A lot of times when I do couples work, a common thing is going to go, I said something that was really important to me and my partner wasn't listening to me. And I said, well, what did you do with that? Well, I got mad, God, I'm being really vulnerable and they're not responding. And usually I'll say, well, finish your sentence. And they go, what do you mean? I go, well, they're not responding the way you'd like them to. They're obviously responding in whatever way they are. It meant something to them, but they're not responding in the way you'd like them to. And I'll say, wow, there's someone else that didn't listen to you. And they'll go, who are you talking about, Dr. Berger? There's only me and this other. I said, you. If you're so focused with saying something to get somebody to listen to you, you're not listening to yourself and paying attention to what you need to say to take care of yourself. Because if me taking care of myself depends on you, I'm always going to be on the hook waiting for you to behave a certain way for me to be okay. That's encounter diminishing. Dr. Kempler, my mentor, gave an example one day. He said that he was in therapy with his therapist, and he was talking about that he was really upset with this contractor that was doing some work on his house. And he got on the phone with the guy. That's landlines. You guys remember we had this? You could dial stuff like that before to cell. Some of you recognize those. Some of you may have never seen a landline. Isn't that amazing? Doesn't that it makes me feel so old? And my birthday is going to be tomorrow. I saw landlines. Um, so he was on the phone with the contractor, and really giving the guy a what for. And then the guy hangs up on him. And the therapist looked at Walt and said, okay, Walt, well, what did you do? Well, he said, I hung up. He said, how come you hung up? Well, because he wasn't listening to me anymore. He said, so you need somebody to keep the phone on their air for you to take care of your business. Didn't you have more to say? Yeah. He said, so why didn't you keep on talking, whether he's there or not? Why does he have to have the phone on his ear for you to say what you need to say for yourself? Why does everything you say have to be hooked into somebody else's response to you? You see, that's what diminishes our encounters is our emotional sobriety or our emotional dependency undermines our emotional sobriety or undermines our emotional autonomy. And we're now hooked into what is the other person doing or not doing? Because if they were behaving the way they should, I'd be okay. And counter enhancing behavior is not spawned through depression. It grows out of autonomy, out of freedom, out of spontaneity. It is not programmed. It is not stilted. It is not a dead speech. It's not, riddled with shoulds and ought tos. It's not filled with blame. You see, as soon as blame comes in, it's going to evoke a lot of defensiveness. These were the four horsemen of the apocalypse that John Gottman identified. In his work, he did this big longitudinal study of people that were just married, and he followed them for many, many years to see, what would be what would lead to a divorce among couples, and could he predict people that were going to be divorced? And what he found was that if a couple's interaction was dominated by the four horsemen of the apocalypse that had predicted divorce 95% of the time. What were the four horsemen? First of all, criticism. You're criticizing the other person, you're blaming them, they're not doing something that they should have been doing if they loved you. You're faulting them. And it's the strangest thing is that we blame other people for what they're doing to try to get them to do something for us. It is such a terrible strategy. It doesn't work. It doesn't usually inspire someone to say, "Oh, I'm so sorry you're upset. Let me correct the problem for you." What happens is people get defensive. And that's the second horseman of the apocalypse. They get defensive. So criticism begets the defensiveness. Defensiveness is now trying to, say it's not my fault or blaming the other person that it's their fault. And it turns into this big power struggle and whose fault is it? As that goes on for a long time, right? The third thing that happens in terms of this is that there's a sense of, you know, futility, right? It doesn't matter what we're going to talk about. We're not going to get through anything. So we kind of throw in the towel. There's a resignation that nothing's going to be any good. And we stonewall the other person. That's another one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and this sense that it's not going to do any good to talk about any of these things because they're not going to be productive anyway. So in healthy communication, we don't criticize. If there's something I want that I'm not getting, I find a way to talk to you about it without making you wrong. If I want to spend more time with you, and instead of saying to you, we never spend time together, what does that do? It puts you on the defensive. If I said something like, I miss you, you're really important to me. I'd love to spend more time with you. Are you interested in that too? You hear the difference? We're not spending enough time together. Or here's another thing that diminishes encounters big time. Why don't you spend more time with me? Why don't you want to talk to me more? Why don't you want to make love to me more? Why are you angry all the time? Why are you so critical? Why questions are the kiss of death in terms of diminishing encounters. Questions like that are really hiding statements. And if you want to have a more authentic, real, enhanced encounter with someone, don't ask questions, make statements. I'd like to talk to you more about what's going on. I'm concerned about, what happens between us that gets you so angry. I'd like to talk to you about that. See, we take responsibility to initiate the discussion in a way that gives it a chance to getting off on the right foot. You see, it was the other thing that Gottman's learned, right? They learned that, oh yeah, that was the third. I was trying to think what was the third horseman of the apocalypse just came to me. So it's criticism, defensiveness, contempt, right, towards the other person, and then withdrawal. So that's the other one. Criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and withdrawal. Um, yeah, boy, that stuff, they just feed on each other, don't it? It's like the wildfires in in California, boy, they just start sucking more oxygen and they burn hotter and hotter and hotter. You cannot get out of that vicious cycle with the consciousness that gets creating it. That's what we say all the time. So you can't blame someone as a way of trying to stop the blaming. You can't fault someone as a way of trying to have less conflict. You know, you have to be able to come at it from a whole different perspective. And that's where living in the pause, as Mary talked about, becomes so valuable. God, I'm finding myself wanting to blame you right now. That's an encounter enhancing statement. Talking about what you want to do rather than doing it. God, I'm wanting to blame you right now, and I know that's not going to be any good to our relationship. I must feel really threatened. Let me talk to you about what I'm feeling threatened about. That's very useful at times. Instead of reacting to what we're feeling or wanting to do, is to describe it. And by describing it, you're going to neutralize it. When you try to be someone you're not, it's not going to work out. That's another encounter diminishing behavior. It's when we own what's our truth that things start to shift. So all of these things are so important for us to continue to stoke the flame of awareness about. And as you can see, it's not just an awareness of what's going on with me, but it's an awareness of you as well. You see, for love to grow in a relationship, we have to feel safe. And the way we feel safe is through empathy and being able to ground our connection with empathy. Now you can say, well, what if I don't know what's the best in me and I'm lost? Okay, own it. Listen, I don't think I can come, and have participate in this discussion in a good way right now. I just want to be mad at you and I just want to call you names and I'm all these other kinds of things. I want to get revenge or whatever. I feel vindictive. I don't want to act that out. That's going to hurt our relationship. Let me take some time to think about this and get a sense and perspective on it. And let me come back and talk to you about it. God, wouldn't you love to hear that from someone rather than calling you, you're an idiot. You're just an idiot. You're impossible to talk to. Oh my God. You're just like your mother, or you're just like your father, or whatever it is. Oh, that's another, by the way, encounter diminishing tactic. Label them just like their mother or father. That's not going to get you anywhere. Trust me. So I encourage you to really bring a full awareness and always have this part of you that's curious is, am I enhancing my encounter or am I diminishing it? And I'll say one final thing. When you are operating from a place where you're enhancing your encounter, then you will seamlessly move to what's next. You will find the words. If you need to cry, you'll cry. If you need to be silent and sad and to grieve or just get perspective, you will move that. That when you're connected to yourself in this way, you will move to what's next. When you are diminishing your encounter, you will create gridlock in your relationship and there'll be no movement. It'll be frozen. And that's when you'll start to feel like it doesn't do any good to talk to my partner. We can't get anywhere. And usually it's because, instead of really trying to get somewhere, you're trying to win, trying to get them to do it the way you want them to. So that's a lot of information, isn't it? Isn't it amazing all that stuff is in my head? Where does that all fit? My God, I sit there and think, my God, Alan, where did that just come from? I guess that's after being around this stuff and studying for all these years that it's all a part of me now. Well, let me open this up and let's bring Tom in and he can say a few comments about He can enhance my encounter with him right now. And
Hey,
we're Tom Potash in, and we're going to bring Julia in too, because Julia is going to give us the female perspective of these things.
before we get started, Alan, I want to go back to the question you were talking about when you were generalizing. You were imagining a conversation between where you were talking to me,
Yeah.
and you remember that. So, and you were, so I just want to complete that conversation. So just for the record, so just do your generalized thing that you said.
Well, people often feel this way or that way when when somebody says something and them upsets them, people often get upset about that stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And one of the things I've been aware of for a long time that often people just don't give a rat's ass.
We're off and running.
That's right. We have a good relationship, Alan,
Yeah.
you and
I
me.
see, and you see how diminished that is. Where it's at, it's like talk about flat as a pancake, right?
Mhm.
All's dead. Well, that's the other thing. That's a good point, though, Tom, isn't it? When when you're on this track, right? You're enhancing your encounter. It's alive.
Yeah,
It's vital. You're experiencing the moment unfolding of the conversation.
yeah. As opposed to, yeah,
It's fallen dead.
yeah.
Yeah, like you said, like, yeah, I think most people will give a rat's ass, or it could be something. I was wondering what I had for lunch today. A totally, you know,
Right, right. It's like,
response that has nothing to do with what I just
have,
said. I
have you
mean,
seen my car keys?
that's
You know,
right. A perfect one. That's a perfect one. See, that's the kind of stuff. So, boy, it's just very powerful to start paying attention to this.
When you were talking about the diminishing um, traits or characteristics, I had a clear vision of arguments I've been in with my wife where I did not see her. Like it what talk about it, it was like all I cared about was being right or more probably not being wrong or not getting caught, like and then juxtapose that to great conversations, even difficult conversations, like being present, like staying with, being okay with having my part in this, and hearing her part of, what was going on for her in that moment. And I just love those two terms, enhancing and diminishing, right?
Well, I was just thinking of an encounter that I had with you, Tom, Rutledge, when that was encounter enhancing. You remember a couple years ago when I was dealing with, Jess and the situation I was confronting with the betrayal, divorce, pain I was in. And I shared it with you, and your response to me, remember I was saying I was so dark. I mean, I was in such a bad place, man, and I didn't see a lot of hope for the future or anything. And I'll never forget your response to me was, Alan, right now you're walking down that corridor and you can't see any light. And you don't know how far ahead of you, but somewhere in ahead, I'm on a right angled corridor, but I can see some light on the corridor I'm at, but you can't see it. There's no way you can, but you can hear my voice. Keep walking.
walk toward, yeah.
That is an example. It gives me goosebumps every time I
Mhm.
see it. Because talk
Yeah.
about connection there. I mean,
Mhm.
right now I've got those goosebumps because it really, you know, I brought myself to you and you responded to me in a way that just deepened the connection I had with you. It
Yeah.
was powerful, man. It'll be a memory I'll take to my grave with me. It was one of those darkest
Yeah.
moments of my life,
Yeah.
but yet brightest. Isn't
Yeah.
that weird?
Yeah.
What I appreciate about that is he didn't like brush off, like, oh, you brush off where you were. He was acknowledging, like, you're in the dark hallway, but, like, there's some light over here, right?
But just that
Because we can all, I mean, just in general talking about that, because we can all use this to help other people. how often, you want people to see the light because you can see it. We can see it with each other. It's like, it's not hard to see it for somebody else. So the idea, but you're right, and I didn't think that through, Tom. But it's the idea of offering the hope, but also it's just the validation. A lot of times, writing the fear book. One of the things I put in there fear, uh, reassurance is to fear as food is to hunger. And it's like reassurance is not what we do so often. We go, oh, everything's going to be okay. That's going to be all right. Reassurance very often comes in the form of just validation. It's more reassuring for somebody to describe something bad and tough for me. And I say, man, that must suck,
Well,
because
yeah.
that's connection. You feel
Yes.
connected. You're not alone.
See how you did that with me, and this is where it really was an incredible thing when I think about it, is you gave me something that was accessible to me. Hope would have been a bridge too far.
Yeah.
But my voice, keep walking towards my voice. You see, you gave me something that was so tangible and something it wasn't based on, if you keep doing that, you might find something. But right now your task is just keep walking towards me and
Mhm.
listening to my voice.
It wasn't asking you to do to be any place different. You're in the dark, so you're in the dark.
Just listen to
Yeah.
my voice. Keep walking
Yeah.
towards my
Yeah.
voice.
Exactly.
I mean, if you'd have told me everything's going to be all right, I would have felt dismissed. Isn't that funny?
Oh, it's so off. Yeah, one of the things I put in the fear book is so often with good intentions, we try to reassure by criticizing. Oh, you don't feel that. Is or minimizing. Oh, it's not that bad. It's like those don't help. I'm getting on an airplane now, and I'm really afraid to fly. Oh, don't be.
That's right. That's right. Well,
Okay.
that Bob Newhart show when he was a psychologist and the gal came in with an eating disorder and she's
Mm.
describing all this, he just turns to her and goes, just stop it.
Yeah, don't do that. Yeah.
All right. Well, Julia, what does all this mean to you?
Well, I took a lot of notes tonight, and I'm still recovering from the flu. I've got a little bit of brain fog, but I
Yeah.
think a couple things stood out to me. One was what you said about trying to control the anxiety that comes in some conversations because I don't have the confidence that I'll be able to handle whatever happens. Um, and that it takes a lot of courage to keep practicing this stuff, and to be honest in relationships and knowing, somebody might not respond well and it's probably going to feel awkward. And I think I've shared about this before. I have placed these shoulds on myself where I'm like, I need this to go perfectly. And maybe I just need to practice.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and that part about when, I'm moving from the best of me, it just happens seamlessly. And there's some relationship where that's so easy and because it feels so safe. And there's no defense. And in other relationships, the anxiety is physical and being aware of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Tom, is there anything else you want to say about this? Tom Potash?
Well, it's sort of in Julia's place. I had a PT tonight, little sore. So I'm gonna pass and just share my appreciation for the conversation yet again on this topic. So we've got a few more minutes. You want to open up for
Yeah, we can
comments?
have a couple people will, either ask a question or make a comment about how this relates to your experience in your life. I will share one thing. I had my first acupuncture treatment today.
Oh,
very, because I'm looking for some alternatives to dealing with this peripheral neuropathy, chronic pain, and
Mhm.
the fact that my, the healing is so slow and stuff like that. And that was a trip, man. I'll talk to you guys more about it next time. Okay, welcome,
Annalise,
please.
how are you?
Hi. Hello.
I,
Well, I was like in Jackal Land and I was really like beside myself for the last 2 days with some issues with my parents and my sister. So I knew that I was being like right down the rabbit hole and I wanted to blame and I wanted to do all of that stuff and I just didn't. So I didn't call or didn't do any of that stuff, but I thought what is the like I was in it. What's the easiest, fastest way to get out of it?
Yeah. Well, you did. You found a good solution. Dr. David Snart says the most important time to keep your mouth shut is when you know you're right.
Or anytime, even it doesn't matter. It didn't matter. The way
Well,
it
that's
was
why when
going
you
and
know
the
you're
attack
right.
and whatever else was going on, it really wasn't going to be any positive interaction here. So it's just
No, but
silence was.
listen, that wouldn't stop me from before. I wouldn't care if it was positive. I just
yeah,
want.
I was going to say that's your recovery, Annalise, that you perceive that and you just go, I mean, I'd love that. What action did you take? None. You know, it's like perfect.
Well, I'm going to get shit about that tomorrow. I can see the emails flying tomorrow. And I actually did have internet trouble, so it was really great. I couldn't do it and all of that, but just fine. I didn't want to respond because I didn't have anything positive to say. And I didn't have any I had no energy to deal with more negativity. I'm dealing with some ill parents and some issues. So I don't have anything good. I don't have anything to say unless we're going to problem solve. And I just wanted to stop. I'm not going to tango. I'm not dancing this one, period.
Right.
Boy, I thought,
That's
and I
that's
just thought,
understanding that you can't control other people, so you're not even going to try. You're not.
no, I
That's
just kept thinking
exactly.
about this conversation like Thursday night with you
Yep.
three monkeys. And so then you got to go, no, it's not, the world's not going to my expectation, but I don't really need to open my mouth right now either.
Yep, right on.
Thanks. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Yep.
Happy birthday for tomorrow. I'll bake you a cake.
Oh yes, I love cake. Carrot cake. That's my carrot cake, cream
Yeah.
cheese. I got it with
Next
pineapple.
week, we're celebrating people. Bring the carrot cake.
Yes. If anybody's coming to Dublin in May, please bring a carrot cake for me.
We can't get it across out of Canada with the tariffs.
Oh my God, that's right. Yeah, it cost $5,000 for me a carrot cake.
Yeah, I think it's easier for me to bake it when I'm over there.
That's probably true.
All right, well, thank you, Leah. We have a few more minutes, right? And is it Delane?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. First of all, I have to say, as a previous right fighter, I spent my life there. And by the grace of God, because of this program, I'm no longer there. And I can give you an example this morning and how I handle things that are so differently than the way I used to. I had asked my husband if something was left out in the car, and it was, and he was going to go get it. And I wanted to get it because I needed to memorize something on the back of it. So I went ahead and went out and got it, and he got a little miffed at me because of it. And I went in and I put on my makeup and I came back out and I said, I'm really, really sorry that I'm hard-headed enough, but I had a mission and I had to complete it and this is the reason why. And we just giggled and looked at each other and said, hard-headed Germans. And that's how we handle things today.
Yeah.
I love it because we can turn it to humor instead of anger and resentment today.
You can own it. See, what I loved about what you did, you owned it. See, that's that sense of who I am. Sometimes I can just own, yeah, look, I was really being unreasonable right there. You were right about that. I don't have to do that. And it's not like, see, once I realize that I'm not just that part of me, I can own these other parts of me because no one part defines me. Right?
Exactly. Yes. And I
vision.
have to tell you that I have spent the last 7 years is the best 7 years of my life, married to a wonderful man that I trust implicitly and just open and honest. And it makes all of the difference in the world.